All right, hello and welcome to chapter 13. This chapter we are going to cover servers and web servers and applications. All right, so again, I'm going to remind you that I will ask you to take several notes and submit them as homework, okay? I have to say that. And remember that all of these notes are going to be what I use to ask on the final exam. So make sure you review all of this. And of course, it's definitely preferable that you go and read the book as well, the chapter in full, so to have a full understanding in depth of the content. All right, so let's take a look at some terminologies. A web application is an application that runs on the remote server and can be accessed by a client, something like Netflix, for example. Apache Server is a free web server and it's the most popular. Over 60% of the web servers that are running on the internet today, they are running on Apaches. So that is definitely something that you want to write down. The Apache server, the free one up here. All right, the ISS, the Internet Information Server. This is run on Microsoft Windows Microsoft Server 2012 or 2016. They are modules that receive requests from specific protocols such as HTTP and deliver them to the ISS for processing. Okay, so what else do you need to know? There are three types of web applications. There are browser-based, and client-based, which is pretty much the same as the browser-based. But they have an application. The client base is they have an application that oops, they have an application that well they are I'm sorry. What are we talking about here? Oh, the browser based. There's browser based, client based. They have an application to run codes instead of the browser. And of course, the third one is the mobile applications. Metadata. That's something that you should know about. Metadata is really something that using data to describe other data. That's really the definition of what metadata is. All right, here's another thing that I want you to write down. The three layers of web applications that you can use. There is the presentation layer, which really presents the information. There is the logic layer, which is processes and interprets the information. And then there is the data layer, which is responsible for holding the data for you. All right. How do you authenticate a user? So that's something we should take a look at. You can use anonymous authentication. That means all users use the same account, which really means no logins. There is basic authentications, which means you are sending the authentications in plain text, not recommended, of course. There is the digest. That means sending an authentication hash. Okay, that's acceptable, of course. Integrated windows, and there is the digital certificates, which is the most popular. When you're using the private and the public key, the asynchronous encryption method. That's probably the preferred way of going through this. When you connect through the HTTPS using the SSL, that's really all digital certificates you're using to communicate with the servers. All right, some of the vulnerabilities of web servers include you have a flawed web design. The design is not that great. Buffer overflow, which we discussed earlier in another chapter. Denial of service attacks. Distributed denial of service attacks, pings, almost everything that you can think of that an attack can happen on a regular host station in a LAN will happen on a web server as well. All right, so what are some of the utilities that you can use to gather information? Well, as you can see, we've used Nmap, Netcat, HTTP Recon, HTTP Print as well. You can use some of the misconfiguration of a web servers. They include, for example, input validations, cross script access, insecure logging system, scripting errors, upload bombing, which means you upload massive amount of files to the servers to fill the hard drive. You have the poison null byte attack, default scripts, sample sample scripts, poorly written or questionable scripts as well, right? What else do you need to know? How to protect cookies. That's something that I want you to write down. How we are going to protect the cookies. So the first thing you need to do, set the secured attribute on the cookie. So only HTTP, which what that means is only HTTP and not scripts can access it. Okay, so only HTTP only can access it. So this is how we're going to be securing the cookies. Number two, set HTTP only attribute with defend against XSS attacks. Set the domain attribute. Verify that the domain matches. The path attribute has to be set on the cookies. Verifies the location of the cookie. And of course, you want to set the attribute of the expiration date for the cookie. There should be an expiration date on there as well. An attribute that is something that is written on the file. For example, if you have a hidden attribute, it hides the attribute. If you have execute only attribute on a file, for example, that file can only be executed. It cannot be deleted. It can be modified, whatever. And even if you have rights to delete it, because there's an attribute, you cannot delete it. You won't be able to delete it. So how do you set an attribute to a file? You go to the file itself. You can do right click, go to properties, and you'll be able to set the attributes on it, just like the NTFS allows us to hide, encrypt, and so on, and make it a read-only file, for example. All right. Web applications uses OpenSSL to implement the SSL version 3 and TLS version 1, and the OWASP to check the cryptographic flaws that are in there. Nessus vulnerability scanner can be used as a decipher. They use for a web service, so it can actually get us it actually can list the ciphers in use by the web service. So it can, Nessus can tell us the vulnerabilities. You can check out the server itself to see what kind of ciphers that it's using. And maybe you can, if it's using a specific type of cryptographic cipher, then you'll be able to maybe, if you have an exploit kit that uses, that knows how to decipher all the data on that web server, you'll be able to do that. So Nessus vulnerability scanners definitely will let you know what type of ciphers that the web server is using. What else do you need to know? So to test the applications, here's what you need. Okay, here's the last thing that I want you to do. How are you going to test a web server? Pen test it. So here are the tools that you can use to pen test a web application. Of course, you can use these as well on an attack. You can use the Perp Suite, proxy servers, Spider, Scanner, Repeater, Sequencer, and the Vega web application tool as well. You can go and take a look at any of these utilities. We'll be able to set up an Apache server within Kali and test it in the lab as well. Okay? Okay, so take these notes that I asked you about, upload them. Please read the chapter and peruse these notes carefully because, again, read them at least once, because you'll be asked questions directly from these notes on your exam. All right, so that's about 10 minutes. So I'll see you on the next chapter.